Welcome to episode 2 of Unit 1, where we are discussing fractions. We have started discussing comparing fractions in our classes this week. We will continue the discussion next week. There will be a concept check coming up this week on comparing fractions. Check with your teacher for the exact day for your class, because it may be different for different classes. In blue are words to know. The words to know for this episode include numerator, denominator, and mixed number, which were discussed in the first episode. So if you didn't see the first episode, feel free to go back and watch it. And also we will be discussing greater than and less than. We completed a foldable in class this week discussing greater than, less than. We even talked about less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. Let's start by discussing how we can use benchmarks to be able to compare fractions. So the benchmarks we are going to be talking about is 0, a half, and 1. And we are going to compare these fractions without finding common denominators or common numerals to compare. So if we take a look at this first problem, we have 3/7 and we're comparing it to 6/10. Well, if I think of a benchmark for 3/7, 3/7 I know is close to a half, but it's less than a half, so I could say it's less. Sorry for the bad scribbles. 6/10 is also close to a half, but it's a little more than half because half of 10 would be 5, and 6 is a little more, where half of 7 is going to be a little more than 3, and so 3 is less. So 6/10 would have to be greater. So now if we take a look at 2/12 compared to 5/11, I always like to start with a half. First I think, okay, well, half of 12 is 6, and 2/12 is not very close to 6. So this number is actually closer to 0. And then 5/11, if I think about that, 11 I know isn't going to come out to a whole number. So I kind of round it to a number like 10, and half of 10 is 5, so I know this is pretty close to a half because 10 is close to 11. So I know that 5/11 is greater than 2/12. And then we have 34/80 and 67/100. So if I'm looking at those, once again, I'm thinking about those halves. So if I wanted to make a half out of the 80, that would give me 40. So 40/80 would be half. So I know 34/80 is less. And then if I look over at the 100, 50/100 would be half. Well, I have more, there we go, 50/100, I have more than half. So I know that 67/100 would be greater than. So using those benchmark fractions, you can decide where is it closer to. Is it closer to 0? Is it closer to a half? Is it closer to 1? So for example, if I had 9/10, that would be one that is closer to 1 than a 0 or a half. Now we are going to look at the technique of using common numerators to compare fractions. So just a quick reminder, the numerator is the number on top of a fraction, telling us how many pieces of something of the whole do we have. It is the part of the whole. And the denominator is the bottom part of the fraction, which tells you the total amount there is. So if I'm looking at 2/4 versus 2/6, and I'm looking that my 2's are the same. So now I'm only having to look at the actual denominators. I want to pick the denominator that is smaller because that means I have more. So if I have 2/4 of a pizza, I have more of the pizza versus only having 2 of 6 slices. So we would say that 2/4 is greater than 2/6. Now look at 5/6 versus 5/8. So once again, we're looking at these bottom numbers. Well, if I have 5 out of 6, I have more than if I have 5 out of 8. So if you think about working problems, if I get 5 out of 6 problems right, I did better on that practice than if I got 5 out of 8. So 5 out of 6 would also be greater than 5 out of 8. Now we are going to look at using common denominators to compare fractions. The majority of the time you are actually going to use common denominators when you are comparing fractions, but you're going to have to create equivalent fractions to be able to have the common denominators, which we will talk in another video. But to just look at basic comparing, so my denominators are the same. They're both 10 on this first one. So I'm looking at 3/10 versus 1/10. And I know that 3/10 is greater than 1/10 because I have 3 out of 10 versus only having 1 out of 10. Next, we have 4/12 versus 5/12. So they both are out of 12. And so 5/12 is going to be greater because it's the greater numerator compared to 4/12. Now we are going to look at comparing mixed numbers. Let's review really quickly what a mixed number is comprised of. So this first part of a mixed number is the whole amount, and the 1/3 is the fractional part. So if I'm thinking of pizza, if I have 5 1/3, that means I have 5 whole pizzas and 1/3 of another pizza left over. So looking at mixed numbers, when we're comparing them, the first thing we want to look at is the whole amount. So if I'm looking at this first problem, I have 4 as a whole and 3 as a whole. Well, I know 4 wholes is more than 3 wholes. So 4 3/4 must be bigger than 3 5/6. Looking at the next problem, I have 8 4/5 and 5 4/7, and I know 8 wholes is greater than 5, so 8 4/5 is greater than 5 4/7. Now in the bottom row, we're going to be looking at the fraction part, because if you look through, all of the whole amounts are the same in these problems. So the first thing I notice on 4 2/11 versus 4 2/9 is those numerators are the same, so we can use that problem solving method. So I know that 2/9, 2 is only 7 away from making a whole amount of 9/9, but 2/11 is 9 away from making a whole amount. So 2/9 has got to be greater, is greater than the 2/11. Now looking at 8 3/6 and 8 1/2. Well, the first thing I'm thinking, the denominators are not the same, the numerators are not the same, so I've got to go to my benchmark fractions. Well, a half is a half, that's easy. But now looking at this 3/6, I know that 3 is half of 6, so these are actually equal because 3/6 is an equivalent fraction of a half. And then we're looking at 5/6 versus 3/4. So we're having this, these are the ones that are a little tricky. So I know that 3/4 is only 1 away and 5/6 is only 1 away. But I have more in the 2 5/6 than I have in the 2 3/4, because this is broken up into 6 where this is only broken up into 4. So 2 5/6 would be a greater amount. The way some of my students were talking about during the fraction problem was that even though if I break a pizza into 4s and I get 3 of the 4, the 5, and I break a pizza into 6 and I get 5 of the 6, I'm going to have more because those 6s are smaller, so that 1 left over would be a smaller piece. We have reached the end of episode 2 for the fractions unit. Remember, we are no longer making the scared faces for fractions because we are going to tackle them and understand them better now. So below I have the quizzes code for you to join. This is Ms. Gillum, but you are more than welcome to join if you are any other teacher's class. You may ask your teacher if they have their own code for your class. I have this open for 13 days. I know the last video I only had it open for a day, so I'm going to try to go back and fix that video. So feel free to join. If you write your name, I can know who it is. Maybe even write your class period would be great. This is not being timed, so do not rush this. You do not get more points by rushing.